Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. Today I'm joined by Ryan Service. I'm Nerdarchist Dave as usual, and Ryan is from 2C Gaming. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you? Hello, chat. How are you guys doing?
I'm good, man. Just living my best apocalypse ever, like the rest of us. Definitely expected more zombies and swords.
Yeah, right. Like one would think if it's gonna go down, might as well make it as interesting as possible.
Absolutely. So, as usual, there will be links in the description and pinned comment whenever that shows up to find 2C Gaming. And you guys actually have a really cool Kickstarter going on right now. Um, which, when we set this up, I didn't even realize that the timing would fall during that. And I'm happy it did because I think it's a pretty exciting book you guys are working on.
Yeah. Well, it's as always. Whenever we work on anything, we're trying to do something a little bit different for the fifth edition community because we like to take a design challenge as like a main premise for our book. So what we did is we said, well, dragons are really fun. Everyone likes them, but like, are they satisfying in a robust experience of fifth edition? So it feels like dungeons are fairly well explored and talked about, but curiously not dragons. And considering they're the other half of the title, we thought, well, let's put a little more love into that. So we looked at all the different historical past edition books that explored and discussed these topics, like 3.5's Draconomicon was like a really big one, is one of my favorite books of all time. And then Council of Worms from second edition. We said, well, why don't we take these concepts and update them for fifth edition so that you can have more interesting dragon NPCs and villains and antagonists. And then also, if you're interested in playing a dragon focused campaign where you play as one of these iconic fantasy creatures, you can make that happen as well. And then it became, well, how do we make rules for all that? How do we balance all of that? And how do we uh, put it all together in a really clean, functional design tool that feels fifth edition? So we quickly realized, well, that's actually really difficult. So we started working on it, and we actually produced a full little like booklet that you can download on it that just has all the basic model of which we use to build upon that whole system, and how to start your dragon out from like tiny little guy to humongous guy all the way at the end. And you can try that right now. It's actually quite fun. You make your own dragon that I promise you will be far more interesting than the current fifth edition ones.
So the book is called Dragonflight. The Kickstarter is called Dragonflight. I didn't actually realize that that download was over there. I'm going to have to go download that for sure. So did you have to come up with like a kind of like a campaign world or campaign setting for playing dragons, or is this something you would just slap on whatever game you're playing?
So the idea is for it mostly to be agnostic, but still true to the general presentation of Dragons in fifth edition with a few minor tweaks. So for example, one of the things we want to give a little more flexibility on is the alignment for dragons, which traditionally has been like very, very rigid. So in the dragons you can give them three aspects of their background. So, for like fifth edition characters, you have ideals, bonds, and flaws. Well, in Dragonflight, you have obsessions, uh, ambitions, and lineage, which play a bigger role in your dragon's personality type, less than its alignment. So we fleshed that out a little bit. We didn't have a specific campaign setting in mind, and instead what we did is we sort of looked at the lore of them and thought, well, how can we make this a compelling gameplay experience? One of the big challenges has been like integrating age, right? How do you make a story that spans a really long period of time in D&D? And how do you reconcile that? Because adventurers, even like 20th level adventures, if you track in-game time, are usually only like what, a few years long, unless you do like a montage time skip thing. So
Yeah.
we built in mechanics to sort of not make it so you had to pad out adventures throughout the course of like 1,000 years to get from Wormling to Ancient, but still tell that story um, in a way that's satisfying. And we're still exploring how exactly we want to bring all of that to bear. But the intention isn't to let people build characters that look like dragons. We want people to build dragons that feel like a profoundly different breed of creature that is true to their general presentation in D&D.
Yeah, when your downtime stretches centuries, that's a whole different ball game there.
Yeah, it's neat. So what we did is we decided to make the dragon's obsession with money a more key component in its growth. So you can't advance your dragon past an age category until you attain a certain level of money. Then you have to like incubate on your money pile for a certain period of time. That's like one of the ways we're dealing with that. So you sort of like a caterpillar, right? You have to like eventually sit down and spend some time focusing on you and sleeping it off and growing to your next age category. And then you can continue to advance until you reach the next age category. And then you have to, get a bigger money pile and so on and so forth. Do dragons make death saves? On characters, they do. Technically, monsters can in 5e, but if you're building it on the NPC side of things, you certainly don't have to.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be a point to it. Either they're either alive or dead for simplicity's sake. I think a lot of times,
Yeah.
or depending on what narrative you need in the game. So, in making, I love the idea of the gold or money cocoon, but in making that more integral to the advancement, that's pretty exciting. So, how does that kind of play out?
Well, our hope is that the game supports two types of play. The first is one-on-one play, where it's one DM and one player, which is a very like customized and personal experience where the player just plays one dragon that advances and gets a very personalized experience. And the focus is on providing meaningful rewards, so giving strong cash and treasure elements that lead to advancement. So managing your hoard is going to be a key component of gameplay. Whereas in adventurers, they're always looking to turn their cash into either like good times or magic items. Dragons are looking to turn their cash into a lifestyle. They're looking to use it to build out their magic and influence the area around, like construct a lair in a home. And we want to make that a fun thing to do. If you're a player, or an interesting thing to design if you're a DM. The tricky part is making sure that it's fun for both sides, right? If it's miserable for a DM to design a dragon NPC, but really fun for a dragon player to play, then we still kind of failed because that wasn't the full intended purpose. So in the chat real quick, the question asks, what about Zorvental? So I assume you're referencing the Dragons of the Great Game from the 5th monster manual of 3.5, which is this idea of dragons playing against each other in a sort of like game of very elaborate chess where every other race are pawns, knights, and queens and rooks. We are going to talk about that. Obviously, I don't think we can call it Zorvental. I have to check our legal mumbo jumbo to see if we can, but we know about that. We know about it, and we think it's very cool. So we would love to explore that. And we actually unlocked our Dragon Society stretch goal, which is talking about how dragons as a community exist and interact with each other and how they socialize, which is very exciting because that's a perfect subject for that particular chapter.
Yeah, I think so. I guess Eberron had a little bit of their own version of that with, I think it's called the Chamber. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it only makes sense anyway that beings that live that long would wield influence, as well as other forms of power. So you brought up a good point that dragons tend to be homebodies, right? If you think
Yeah.
about it, but they also have to accumulate their hoards somehow.
Yeah, they gotta go out and get that money.
Yeah, yeah. So I do like that idea. So how much is the lair? How much is that a part of this product?
It's going to be a pretty big part. The book is going to be pretty robust based on the stretch goals we've already unlocked. So it's going to be, a pretty fancy piece that we're putting together. It's our most successful project thus far. We'll see where it ends up, but it's trending towards that. And we're going to obviously invest all of that into making it a really kick-ass book, and that's very exciting. But so the layer structure is going to be a key component of the adventuring loop, whereas adventurers are always looking to go from A to B to C to D to E to F to so on and so forth until they end up at Z. We want the dragons to start at a location, venture out, and loop back, and every time they go out, we want them to go a little bit farther, be a little more ambitious. But then that looping back needs to be fun. So going to the next thing needs to be as fun as coming back. So we're really looking forward to providing dragons with the ability to customize their layer actions from like a very broad list that feels appropriate and thematic, so that not every red dragon is doing the exact same layer shenanigans, right? We want that to feel different and unique and thematic to what you feel is important about your creature, but also the regional effects, like how it applies and interacts with the space around it. Right, we want those to be things that are really fun. So like one of our hopes, for example, is that like maybe you play a one-on-one game with Dragonflight with a friend, you create a really, really cool dragon, and then you can like port that dragon into like your next campaign as this like really well developed and fleshed out NPC with this elaborate backstory that you just created, and it becomes like the next villain of your campaign. And that we want that transition to be seamless, or vice versa, right? Like you create a really cool dragon character and then or NPC, and you're like, oh, this would be really fun to like do a mini adventure with, and then I play that.
We
We'll see how well we do, but we have strong ideas.
we had played we had done Saver Dice, which was a bunch of YouTubers playing D&D, and Guy Schlanders had run Caro Stones, and the opening part of the game was us as like these dragon gods, and like the other players are kind of like pussyfooting around trying to figure out like the politics that were going on and the story, and I was just like, I'm a dragon, I'm gonna breathe on somebody. So how often do you get to be a dragon? Like, so they were really trying to like clearly like this the scenario that was set up, like there was conflict, right? So as a dragon, I'm like, I just want to dive into this and be a dragon.
Yeah, it's one of the things we really want to reinforce. And this question gets asked a lot on our Kickstarter is like, how does this fit in with regular adventurers? And our answer for the most part is like, it doesn't. We want you to be a different kind of creature. We don't want you to be a paladin dressed up as a dragon, right? Or a wizard who casts true polymorph into a dragon. You are this thing. This thing doesn't think about the world in the same way, right? Like it has very strong opinions and a perspective that is profoundly alien and different from the way a halfling or an elf or a human thinks about things. Now, we want that to be relatable and impactful, but also feel like it's a different thing. So I would love, the goal is for players when they experience this, or the DM, to feel like they can develop this special, unique character that just feels like it's from a different world. And in a way that makes sense and resonates with the people that it interacts with. Like I always think of my favorite part in those new Hobbit movies is just when Smaug and Bilbo are talking. It was my favorite part in the Hobbit book, because the way Smaug talks is just so different. How everyone else in the book has talked up to that point. You can just tell Smaug is this different being that thinks about the world in a different way, and I love that. It's so interesting to me.
How do you address that? Because trying to get players and DMs into the mindset of being a dragon.
Yeah, well, a big part of it was changing like the personality traits. Like if we had used ideals, bonds, and flaws, it would have framed it to think of it like a character, right? That's just ported into a different shape. So changing the personality traits is a big one. Focusing on dragon society is going to be a big one, and how they interact with the world, but also mechanically, like a lot of the abilities that we're giving these dragons are specifically focused on like, having very powerful and significant influence over creatures that are not dragons. So like one of the dragon subclasses, we call them paradigms, is an imperator, which is a sort of a tactician leadership role, that you can have, this sort of miserly, like beard stroking, yes, mastermind type dragon. And one of the abilities you can have is to change your frightful presence to a different type of presence. You get to pick which one you want from a selection, and a lot of the options there are all about like influencing other creatures, like beguiling them or leading them in a supernatural and really effective way that feels, it's not something a regular D&D character would do. It's like very clearly like I am more powerful than you and can just warp perception with my very presence, kind of thing. Right. And our hope is that that makes people feel like they're playing something really different.
So are the dragons are the dragons treated as a class or a race with being dragon and then having you would have like a class that you kind of add on to that?
Yeah, so to sort of answer that in a couple chat questions simultaneously, could the system be applied to playing an archfey or something similar? In theory, the model could. The system, no. The model, maybe. But the way that it works is we present it like a class for the sake of clarity. But what it does is it basically, if you're familiar with the 3.5 model of dragons, where they had like 12 age categories and then like a general stats for each category, it kind of works like that. So you can build a first level dragon, but what we really have is you have 1 to 7 levels of wormling, then like 8 to 14 levels of young, then like 15 to 19 levels of adult, and then like the final level is ancient. And you can, how you want to do that advancement from those levels is different than you have the treasure, which gates the age category. But the idea there is at any given point, you can very easily use that model to create an NPC that feels right, or a character. And we're building a special character sheet just for these that presents that information in a way that can be used either or. Because you know how playing a character as an NPC in 5e doesn't really work. It's not quite, there's a lot of extra information you don't really need. So what we want to do is we want the sheet to have, if the DM just wants to run it like a monster, they don't have to look at all the other character stuff. They just flip to the like monster section of the sheet, and that it's all ready to run and ready to go. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but there's a lot to cover there.
Oh, so that sounds like there's kind of like an asymmetry between the monster and the playable.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, sorry, go for it.
Yeah, well, I was just bringing up as a point because it's how it sounded, but also like how does this like jive with your epic stuff? Does it at all?
Well, not yet. We did announce our latest stretch goal, which was like it jives. It will possibly, if we get that stretch goal, probably jive with our epic stuff, because what is the world without epic dragons? And I mean, I feel like every person who played D&D, when they looked at the 5th edition dragons and like were like, oh yes, wormling, young, adult, ancient, and they're like, wait a minute, where's my great worm? What do you mean there's no great worm? Like, are you kidding me? You can't do that, right? Like, it's not allowed. It's against the law. You can't have no great worm. You have to have it. So great worm will be our epic age category if we unlock that stretch goal. And then for the folks who really enjoy our epic 5e stuff, they can have that whole interaction. So in answer to the chat question, any subclasses or mechanics that integrate a dragon rider? No. Though people have been asking, and we're going to have a community discussion around that to see if that's something we can address and how. Obviously, being a dragon rider is very, very cool and fun and interesting. And
I like the way Brian brings it up, though, as not playing the dragon rider, but more like the dragon rider's a familiar to the, or companion to the dragon. That makes more sense to me, because anytime you want to play a dragon rider game, it's like, well, you have the dragon, which is going to be tough and very hard to kill. Comparatively speaking, the dragon rider, not so much.
Yeah.
So balancing those two things is super difficult.
On top of the like rather finicky mount mechanics of 5e that always just sort of interact very weirdly with the actual play of using the mount, especially with intelligent mounts, like gets even worse. So the Imperator paradigm has a dragon sworn, which is like a special minion that you get that like does things for you. You could, in theory, have the dragon sworn like hop on and zoom around, but it'll be an interesting subject to explore as a community, because it's been asked a lot. It's not something we intended to do, but whenever our community generally makes a rather large statement like we want thing, we say, okay, well, let's think about that. How do we make that a thing? And if so, does it fit? Is it going to be balanced? A million and one discussions that need to be had, but it's a discussion we're interested in having.
It kind of makes me think of the Ranger Beast Companion, right? Which or like I only have one real issue with that is it just never has enough hit points, right, to be make it
Yeah,
viable. At 20th level, it's got like 80 hit points, and that is still
yeah,
a single round of attacks, if not a attack that could just wipe out your beast companion. So that's
yeah.
how I see the Dragon Rider. Like you're gonna do all these tests, and you're like 99 out of 100 tests, it went splat in round two.
Yeah, it's something we've done a couple like designs to address in ways that are interesting. A lot of it just sort of it comes down to like here are special rules to ignore the existing rules about mounts and change how they work so that it's not a miserable experience for everybody involved. Um, I'm interested to see what we come up with. One of the ideas that people were saying is like, I want to have a character and a dragon character synergize into like, two characters buddy buddy. Like someone came up with the idea of like, what if I want to adventure alongside a dragon companion as like rider and partner. And I was like, that actually sounds like a really cool adventure with like two players, right? One playing the dragon, one playing the rider, and one DM. That sounds really fun to me. I don't know how I'm going to make that happen, but it'd be interesting to try.
Yeah. So I think I saw something on Kickstarter with the idea of, with dragon play, it's like 1 to 3 dragons.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
very specific. So how did you come up with those numbers?
Well, we really wanted one-on-one play to work because it feels like it's a thing the community has generally been saying, like we want to do more one-on-one D&D type games. So we're like, well, playing a dragon kind of fits with that because you're pretty strong relative to everything else. Like you can take your lumps and you can kick butt even at a fairly young age. So your character doesn't accidentally get gibbed, or you don't have to obviously lowball the character constantly. You can fight fairly robust challenges and still feel on top and like you aren't being treated unfairly or with soft hands. Like you just kicked 4 trolls butts by yourself, my dude. Good job, right? Like that's fun. So we wanted that to happen, and then we thought, well, of course people are going to want to play with their buddies. So what is the best balanced experience? And we played around with the paradigms because we wanted people, if they played together, to make their dragons feel really different. So basically the logic was there are 3 paradigms. So what happens if everyone picks the same one? So what if everyone picks the knight, which is the sort of martial focused paradigm where you're all about the teeth and the claws and the wing and the breath weapon, right? Like, what do you do? Well, we thought, okay, so let's make 3 knights and they all need to play differently. You'll have a different meaningful experience. Sort of how like my favorite subclass in 5e is the battle master, because you can have 3 battle masters in a party and they'll all play totally differently. I love that. I love that about the battle master. So we did something like that, and we said, okay, so we can do this with 3. Can we do this with 4 players? 4 players playing a knight. No, we started to get some pretty serious overlap where it felt like everyone was going to be, there's going to be a lot of sameness between the different dragons. So instead what we said is, well, let's stick with 3 because that'll give people, making it feel like even if you all pick the same paradigm, you'll be able to be unique amongst your peers. And that was what we decided to go with. Now, obviously you can play with 4, but our recommendation for that will be like, try not to all stack the same paradigm if possible, because otherwise you'll have problems or you'll have an issue of your character not feeling special, and that's never fun for anybody.
That makes sense. That answers that question. We ran out of things to switch it up, but I guess if you can play 3 knights and it feels different, you said there's 3 paradigms, right? Mm-hmm. That does leave room to switch it up some. How do you balance running adventures with multiple dragons? Because they always just feel like solitary creatures.
Yeah, they do. So the premise will be why do dragons form a dragon flight, especially dragons of different species? That's a big question the book wants to discuss, and part of that is because the personal power and ambition of that allows you to advance much more quickly. So instead of pure time being a factor as to how dragons age, they can either wait a really long time, or they can use the power of their hordes to advance faster. And being a dragonflight allows you to accumulate more money and work together to advance your growth more quickly. So you can sort of like do the traditional dragon model, which is you just hang out for a really long time and don't die, and then you become huge. or you can sort of work out, which is go get money, make giant money pile, right? Share the money pile, get stronger, go out, acquire, like that's there's a incentive, um, which is that sort of collective ambition.
Does
And
does the book kind of answer the question of like, or offer up suggestions for the DM of, well, here's why your dragon would want to advance faster, and this is what would motivate him to take these
mhm.
risks?
Yeah, we are very interested in exploring personal motivations and goals for these things, besides sit in cave and eat princesses or whatever their general logic is. The goal is to make them proactive. One of my biggest complaints about a lot of like 5e villain and 5e antagonist design, and just RPG antagonist design in general, is often the character just sit. They don't exist until the DM really needs them to. The DM says they exist, and you always see minions or influence, but there's no actual engagement with the character beyond like threatening messages via illusions or something. And you see this a lot in a lot of RPG designs where the villain only becomes real at the very end. Like almost every Paizo module I've played, like the villain just is like in the shadows and never like a personal force until the very end. And we like it when dragons are flying around and burning down villages, and like, you know, they come up to the players and they go, "You are small," and throws one into the lake, and being like, that's just because you're in my space and I don't like that. Leave my space, please. I won't kill you unless you come back, but that was a warning, and go get your friend now. He's way over there. Right. I love those experiences. One of my favorite experiences in D&D was just like, I had an ancient dragon land in front of my 5th level party. And it was like, "Hi there. This is my house, my space. I just want to let you know that so that you can do your thing, but know that this is my space and these are my rules." And then it left. My players could not stop talking about that. I love that. Like, that's so cool, right? Like, and
The dragon just
like,
showed up and punked them.
yeah, right. And like, if I we're gonna let people play dragons, I want them to do those kind of things. I want those to be like the kind of adventures dragons have, which is like, go to the town and like tell them they're under new management because you've built a lair, right? And like, that's your adventure for the day, right? And like, how do you do that, right? That's a dragon adventure.
You guys are under my protection for the low
Yeah,
cost.
yeah. And so like a dragon flight, you know, they can have a lot of reasons to do those kind of things. Maybe it's to compete with rivals, right? Maybe it's to like, because one of the who has more money than other dragons, right?
Yeah.
So like, go get them, right? And that can be a huge fun thing. So in answer to one of the chat questions, is there much that can even really challenge them in an encounter? Using standard 5th edition rules, no, but we are really good at challenging very powerful characters. My company specializes in being really good at that. We've made lots of books about difficult encounters, so we're fairly confident in our ability to provide robust challenges even for really powerful characters.
Yeah, 2C gaming, that's kind of your shtick. You know, you guys have a product that's all about epic level play, 21 to 30th level, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then have a different take with your monster books and how you design them.
Yeah, our TPK Bestiary series, which is just all about giving high level players a hard time because they always seem to not have a hard time, and that's no fun for anybody. They need to take their lumps just like everyone else.
So, how are you guys tackling Dragon Society? This is an aspect I think is going to be pretty fascinating to a lot of people.
Yeah, well, you know, something I'd really encourage people to read if they don't get the chance is 3.5's Draconomicon, which is a wonderful book because it explores the psychology of them in a great detail, and I love that book for that. But the long story short is, we want to make it feel like there's a different world that normal D&D players aren't seeing. It's that dragons are talking and dancing and interacting with each other. You just don't see it because why would you, right? Like, you don't get to see any of that. That's their own thing. So our hope is to sort of peel back the veil on what is revealed to be this really interesting social dynamic. So for example, with the lineages, we've put a big emphasis on like pedigree, like where you come from, who your parents and grandparents were, not because it like, in each species has a different value for its lineage. So like silver dragons view their lineage as like aspect of philanthropy. Like the more philanthropic your lineage, the more prestigious. right? And then we also have saying like what it means to start your own lineage within that species and try and go out and do your own thing. So there's a strong familial component. So we want to emphasize relatives because there's aren't a lot of dragons, so everyone sort of knows each other, right? Like it's a assumedly, at least according to like the general gist I get from a lot of 5e lore, is like there's less than 1,000 of them at any given point in like Faerun. If you had to put a number on it, maybe a little bit more than that, of various ages, with the oldest ones being well known and prestigious. So they all sort of know each other, right? And what does that mean when it's a small community? And when geography doesn't play a huge role for them, right? They can go wherever they want, whenever they want. How does that all fit together?
1,000 is a really small number when you talk population, but
Yeah,
1,000
right.
seems much bigger where you're like 1,000 dragons.
It's like 100 reds, 100 golds, 100 bloods. It's like,
Yeah.
dang, that's a lot, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, what does that mean? What does that look like? You know, they all know each other. How do you find? How do they find romantic partners? Like, how does that work? And what are the social dynamics of that? So our thought is that for the most part, dragons are going to be very insular, or not. Insular is not the right word, but very close knit in terms of the relationships with each other. And that there'll be very powerful dynamics pushing and pulling them in different directions that we want to explore, like the desire to strike out on your own and start your own lineage versus honoring the long, literal millennia long tradition of like you're still living relatives, right? Like what does it mean to not listen to Grandpa Gold Dragon, who's been on this planet for 2,000 years and is like, you really should be doing this and you're not doing that.
It really changes how how they would think and what they would do. Like in my mind, I was thinking about like the adventurers that find a lair, kill the gold dragon. We'll just call it a gold dragon, and then they find that now they're being hounded by a red dragon. Not because that gold dragon's dead, but because such insignificant creatures killed one of theirs. And they probably hated that gold dragon, but it's the point.
Yeah, right. Like it sort of, it feels like there might be some repercussions beyond like,
Yeah.
Just killing it, right? Maybe the gold dragon has some family that has some strong opinions about what just happened.
Well, I think it would be even more interesting and fun to have it come from somewhere where the players wouldn't expect, or those people wouldn't expect. Like, you should be diametrically opposed to this thing, but here you are trying to avenge it.
Or maybe it's like Red Dragon Rival, with which it's had a century-long conflict. It's like that you stole my thunder.
Yeah,
buddy.
That was an unsatisfying conclusion.
That was an unsatisfying conclusion to a rivalry that's been going on for longer than you've been alive. So we're going to have to figure out what to do next, which will not be fun for you. So Brian Smith, in answer to your concept, this is not for veteran players, at least in the sense that you won't have to learn new skills. Your base 5e skills of how to play and use a character will still be applicable. If you're a DM, this will be more if you're looking to get more out of your dragons when it comes to customizing them. I would still say if you want to you rolled on a random encounter table and said ancient green dragon, just use the one from the monster manual. Dragonflight isn't going to be any more efficient than that process. But if you're prepping a game and you want a really cool dragon antagonist that is excellent at the arcane arts or brutally physically powerful or like a strategic mastermind and has mechanics to support that make it feel special and unique, this book will make it really easy for you to do that. It'll take all the legwork out of that process by giving you robust, challenging, and balanced options that will deliver on the experiences they promise. So in that way, maybe you could consider it for like veteran DMs who are looking to really customize their stuff. But I feel like every DM, from new to experienced, wants their dragons to be special, right? There's just something about them that always makes you want to just go a little bit of the extra mile to make them neat and exciting.
So, are you adding any new dragons, or is it all about building a better mousetrap?
We are adding new ones. So we have a stretch goal to unlock a special index of what we're calling like unique. It's a placeholder, but unique dragons, which are essentially going to be ones that are a little weird.
Uh-huh.
Because I like weird ones. Like in our TPK bestiary, we did some weird ones called orchid dragons, which are flower themed, and they all unleash a pheromone type effect that is very frustrating for people, and it's weird, and it comes at you sideways, and that's kind of fun. But we want to explore that a little bit more. I remember fondly in a book from 3.5, which was the Dragon Magazine Compendium, which was like a weird anthology of all their best of Dragon Magazine from that era, where they had a purple dragon whose breath weapon created a blade of force that out of its mouth, and it just chopped you up with it. And I thought that was like really cool. I was like, oh, that's sweet. So one of the dragons I'm looking forward to designing is a purple dragon that has a big like sword-like horn that it ignites with its breath weapon to create this like really intense damaging attack that it can use to chop and stab things, which I think would be really fun.
Yeah, 3.5 added a lot of weird things. Of course, there's also like 6 or 7 monster books, so that'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end, they were just like, "Go for it!" Like, we've checked all the boxes we can think to check, so just go nuts.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to explore from older editions that we're taking inspiration from, and I've been mulling over whether I want to pick up the 4th edition Draconomicons. I know there's like one for good and evil dragons, just for the inspiration. Some people have recommended them to me, so I probably should look at them, because 4th edition deserves its attention. It is noteworthy in its content, so I would probably like to think about that a bit and see what else I could lift conceptually.
Yeah. So, at what point do you start unlocking your new unique dragons?
So if I remember correctly, and let me double check my 60,000. So unique dragon types happens at 60,000, and we are currently at 38 with 26 days left to go.
So more than halfway there. Yeah, I usually don't talk about a Kickstarter this much. I just think the concept is unique. It's fun. It's a cool throwback to Council of Worms from 2nd edition.
Some of that. I'm very happy to talk about it. I would certainly encourage anyone who's like skeptical on what we're doing, just pick up the free promo we made. I put a lot of work into it, and if it doesn't mesh with what you want to do, fair enough, right? At least you knew how we were going to do it, because that vehicle for the most part is going to stay fairly consistent in terms of model as to how it's going to work. And that's always been something we like to do, which is get a strong proof of concept for whatever project we want to show off.
So you guys, Dragonflight, epic levels, where do you want to go next? Because you kind of going in some different and fun directions with 5e.
Yeah, so we're trying to do a couple things. So one is we're trying to publish with independent creators who are, because right now in 5e and the RPG publishing space in general, people are sort of having to either make the jump from independent creator to establishing your own publishing company, which is a pretty big jump, right? Because it's basically doing everything yourself versus working with a company. And we're trying to help people fill that gap a little bit by saying we're reaching out to creators and saying, hey, we really like what you do. We would like to help you put a book together. Here's how we can help, and here's a bunch of different options as to how we can do that. Would you be interested? With the sort of idea of handling the stuff we know really well how to do, which is manage artists, produce the book, get it printed and shipped and all that stuff, and make sure that it's high quality, and allowing them to explore their creative side of things. So that's one of our big goals. The other one is we are looking to eventually move out of the 5e space under that specific 5e banner, and we will have more to talk about that in the future. But we also think that there's a lot to love about 5e, so there's a sort of interest in us in taking the stuff we really like and then modifying it with a few key components to create a sort of new experience that feels that keeps all the stuff people like but fixes a lot of the problems that people have. That's a big ambitious challenge and something we're working towards, but it's a big goal for us. And because I love 5e, it's my favorite D&D system by a country mile. but I think it's pretty clear that there are some problems, and I don't think Wizards of the Coast is interested in introducing an updated rule set, which to me, I think they should, because yeah, I didn't like buying new core rule books for 3.5, but at the end of the day, it was a pretty nice change.
Yeah, they fixed some glaring issues.
It really helped, like, and it did improve the game. And yeah, there was some grumbling about buying new books, but at the end of the day, I was really glad they did it. And I don't think they're probably going to do that for 5e, but we'll see. We'll see.
So Joe wants to know, do you need any dragon art? Do you guys take submissions?
We do. If you are an artist and interested in showing us what you got, we would certainly be interested in taking a look. We're always interested in seeing what people have. And if we don't have work for you now, that doesn't mean we may not in the future. We have a big list of people, writers, artists on what we call our sort of like watch list, which just means if we have an opening, we look at the list and we pick from that list, like, hey, let's see who these people are first, because they reached out to us. And we'd be interested in taking a look. I think our lead artist for Dragonflight is pretty well determined, because he's a dragon specialist. But that doesn't mean he's going to be able to do every piece of art in the book. So it's always good to have. Where and how? Well, our website, 2cgaming.com, has a contact page. And just through there, you can message us. This is the best way to get a hold of us in a professional capacity.
Nice. Also, Joe, you can also hit us up at Nerdarchy Gmail as well if you're interested. So when Brian was talking about, can you convert to like Fae, that would probably be an interesting concept, an Arch-Fae game, where I would see it being more based around like political intrigue, between the courts. Than anything, and I know players, or I've seen gamers ask often about political games, and that seems like it would be like the ultimate political game.
Yeah, I mean, other monsters are really interesting. Like, I think there's a couple sort of iconic families of monsters that really stand out. Fae and Fae Lords, I think, are a big one. Vampires are another really popular one. Vampires, liches, and sort of all of that. For us, it would be interesting to sort of see if people could ape our model for doing the dragons and make a sort of Fae Lord model, because one of the biggest tricks of the Dragonflight design is that it not only creates a character, but it creates a monster with a CR that is appropriate, right? So like, using the same tools, you can create something that can be used two different ways, and both of those experiences will be really robust and work well. I would love to take a look at like Fae and sort of think about how all of that would happen. Unfortunately, a lot of other companies have done Fae their due diligence and really captured, I think, a lot of their neat and interesting designs. So we would be kind of chasing after them in a lot of ways to try. But it could be a fun project to look at. And I would certainly be interested in seeing, if someone were to compile all the sort of different interpretations of Fae Lords that have been done so far, like what are the stuff you can extract from that and sort of plug into this model to create something similar. It'd be cool.
5e definitely, fell short when it comes to Fae. Right out of the official stuff, I would say. You have to go, they're very low challenge, mostly.
Yeah.
Like 6 and below, I want to say. Kwood Publishing, they did a book on Fae, and then Kobold Press has done a lot with like.
Yeah, they've done a lot of Fae stuff,
which is cool. I mean, we got a lot of good people doing a lot of cool stuff out there, which I appreciate different takes. But you never know. Your take might be different than theirs. So
yeah, I mean, I think when I think about Fae, my sort of iconic piece of fiction that always gives me my favorite interpretation of them is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. If you've ever read that book, it's a wonderful, wonderful book that just captures their weirdness so fantastically, and I thoroughly enjoy that. It's a very inspiring piece of fiction. I don't know. I'm trying to think in 5e, because they established there's like the Fae courts, if I remember correctly, but they just sort of talk about them.
Yeah,
they don't really show them. They're just sort of like, they exist somewhere, go find them maybe.
And then, when you actually get into the monster books, nothing is even close to being what you would consider, like a Fey noble.
Yeah. So Brian, in response to your question, do wyverns get some love? No, they do not. Only true dragons. Sorry, but only true dragons. And it we might have like what some of the customization options include feat options for your dragon. So like a venomous stinger tail would definitely be something you could have on the menu that could give you a wyverny vibe. But just like upgrading standard 5e wyverns, yeah, they're a different breed of thing than the true dragons, and we wanted to really focus on. There's always a limit of like you could in theory do that, but it's sometimes better to just keep the experience really focused and the vision clear, kind of thing.
Will the book talk about how dragons view those other draconic creatures that are not dragons?
Yes, they will definitely do that. In terms of one of the things we're interested in talking about a lot is, and this was discussed in the 3.5 Draconomicon, and I thought it was a cool discussion, was like their religion and sort of their views of lesser races. Or when I say lesser races, that's from the dragon's perspective. They often see it that way. And that can be a troubling perspective, I think, for a lot of people, which is this sort of inherent superiority vibe that they give. It's a very sinister thing, but even the good dragons have it, right? Like, even silver dragons, the most philanthropic and gregarious when it comes to non-dragons, they all sort of have this vibe that like, well, we're better than other people, we just don't have to be mean about it, right? But they all think that, and that's going to be a very tricky thing to tackle from an artistic standpoint, and I'm not exactly sure how we want to do that yet, but it's pretty clear, at least from their fiction and how they've been represented in D&D thus far, that that's been an opinion they've held from pretty much since first edition, which is we are the best.
Well, when you live thousands of years and you have something, and let's face it, like in D&D, we're like a human can live 100 years, but if it was actually based off of a medieval time period, no, they lived like 40, right? 50 was old.
I do not have any influence from Mr. Rex, though I know I am familiar with his videos. I think Mr. Rex is influenced by the same books I read, and that's what his videos are about, like Draconomicon and digging up all that old lore from DM's Guild that they post. And in my case, I do have my copy of Draconomicon. It's over there, which is a great book. Don't buy it physically because it'll cost you an arm and a leg these days, but the PDF is on DM's Guild for a very reasonable price. Absolutely should buy it because it's great.
Did you have it left over, or did you find out the hard way?
I had one left over, but its spine got damaged, so I picked up a new one right around 2015. A little after 5e came out. I read pretty quickly that 5e had a lot of cross compatibility with 3.5, in that some of its designs could be converted. So I immediately purchased pretty much every 3.5 book that I could get my hands on, with the anticipation that they would be very inspirational and useful for creating 5e content. And they weren't as expensive then. They were all roughly around $60-ish, and cheaper if I was lucky. But now it's like incredibly expensive. And some of them, like a Book of Vile Darkness, that isn't even up on DM's Guild. You just can't get it anymore. So my 3.5 copy of Book of Vile Darkness is worth like a ton of money. So I'm very, very glad I have that.
I guess Wizards didn't want that to be a representation of their company anymore.
I think it's pretty fair considering the content within. It's written by Monty Cook, and it actually is like a really great book. He has this wonderful forward at the start where he's like, this is not meant to glorify this. This is meant to just say, like, this is evil at its worst. If you are going to depict it, this is what it might look like in your game. Don't be thoughtless or cruel with this. Don't be sadistic. And like this isn't a license to do whatever you want in your game just because we wrote it. Like, don't be dumb with this. But if we're gonna do this, we're gonna talk about evil. We're not gonna mince words. We're gonna go all the way. It's a great forward by Monty Cook to sort of frame the discussion of that book and the lens by which you should view it. Not for the faint of heart, I think, but a cool book nonetheless. You can get Exalted Deeds, which is the companion piece to that, on DM's Guild, which is also a cool, weird book.
And then there was, I think, I don't know if you're familiar with Noah Atweiler, Spoonie, Counter Monkey. he does a review on his channel, but there was a third party publisher that put out the like an erotic version.
Oh, the
of
Book of Erotic Fantasy. Yeah, that's like a famous one. Yeah, I mean
they got weird back in the 3.5 era.
it was like stat everything, right? Like that was the logic. Like if it exists, there are rules for it. Go, right? That was the reasoning. In answer to your question, Brian Smith, are there unique layer or legendary action options? Yes, you will get to customize your dragon's legendary actions and layer actions to fit what you want to do. Obviously, some of them will be better than others for your design, but we anticipate you'll be able to deduce that, or at least knowingly make the choice that you don't want the most optimal option.
Well, that's definitely a change too. Wonder how that's going to affect gameplay and combat if you have 3 dragons each with 3 legendary actions plus their normal actions.
Yes, so dragon flights do not get their legendary actions. When 2 or more dragons team up, they don't get them. And we're building a compensation model that helps them sort of manage that, where they're going to get a collective dragon action that they take, sort of like a layer action, which is this like teamwork benefit that they get. So because the action economy of that is horrifying otherwise, it's like I remember I opened a Xanathar's Guide to Everything and looked at the random encounter table, and like one of the options was like 1d8 plus 1 unicorns or something, and I'm like, oh no. You can't do that. You can't do that. It's like, that's miserable.
That does sound terrible. And I don't think I've ever thought about that, because it's a relatively low level, weakish monster, but it is one that gets legendary actions.
Yeah. So what is one turn like with 9 unicorns on the battlefield? It's like, oh no.
The true punishment for your players will not be surviving the encounter.
It'll just be like not dying of boredom.
Not the characters surviving the encounter, but the players having to endure it.
Just like, is it my turn yet? Well, we're on unicorn number 7, so I'll let you know. We're getting there. Close. Yeah. It's like, oh, miserable.
And you're just constantly interrupting the players.
That was something we did with our TPK Bestiary, is we wanted to make the 2/3 of the monsters had to not be legendary. And that was true of the first one, and it's true of the sequel, just because it's like, there needs to be less of that. Like, not every high-level encounter should be legendary. And it also helps the DM run cleaner encounters if they have more non-legendary options to choose from, because then the action economy doesn't get shattered into a million pieces, and becomes a bog through which everyone must endure.
Brian Smith, the random encounter that turns into a 4-session arc.
Yeah, right. Like, it's kind of funny the first time it happens, but it's real fast.
There's a sadistic part of me that wants to see that, but there's the logical part that knows it's just bad.
Yeah, right. Like, it's Ryan, a cool spectacle, but a bad play.
Why did you have to put that in my head? That is pretty insane. I had another train of thought that you totally derailed me with that in the 4-session arc. So what does the compensation look like? Matter of fact, because I think that could be kind of a cool model to follow for other encounters where you want to use these legendary creatures, but like you said, and it's kind of obvious that this is going to take forever if everyone, if there's just all these actions all the time.
Yeah, well, the compensation is going to be something that feels collaborative, because we want to incentivize this teamwork aspect. Because a dragon at any point, and we learned this from Epic Legacy, which is an epic character could choose to lone wolf it at any time and have a really good time, because they're epic and can whoop a lot of ass all by themselves. They don't need help. Sure, they couldn't kick as much butt, but they could still have a really good time. So the dragon flight, at any given point, we're fighting the truth that a player could just leave the flight and go and have a great time. right? Now, we don't want that to happen. If you're playing with your buddies, we want you to play with your buds. So we're building a gameplay model that will incentivize that collaboration, where it feels like if you're striking out on your own, it's either for like a short session thing or a personal thing, and not because you don't want to play with your buds, or you, right? And so we want it to be collaborative, but we also don't want it to be a cause of conflict where people are debating over what the effect should be, right? It should feel, it's going to be a balance between getting people to work together but not arguing over what the action or effect will be for 5 minutes. Right? We want it to be like, let's do this, well, maybe this, oh yeah, okay, yeah, how, let's vote on it real quick, 2 or 3, okay, we're doing that one, boom, done, right? Like that's as much as 30 seconds. That's the longest any decision in 5e should take, and that's like my hard limit. So that gotta stick to that philosophy.
Yeah, it starts to bog down when everything's by committee at the table, and then you have an hour of planning, but not actually doing anything.
Yeah, Brian, so in answer to your question, the Dragon Designer PDF that we have says it has to be enough money for you to rest on comfortably, the value of which is determined by your DM, or enough treasure. You have to be able to sit on it fully and relax comfortably, with a minimum value of X.
That kind of makes me think of previous editions too, kind of, right? Mm-hmm. Like where the way you gain levels was through treasure.
Yeah, well, I would be lying if I said that wasn't inspirational. where the more I play 5e and the more I kind of get bored on experience and the awkward leveling moments it creates, I kind of think it'd be kind of nice if we just went back to town and just cashed in all this money we spend or we can't spend on anything for levels. Why didn't we do this to start? Right? Because in 5e, unless you homebrew a whole magic item shopping system, that money just sort of, sits there unless you really go out of your way and make your DM do a bunch of custom legwork that they're probably not going to feel good about. It's like, build me a fortress. Can we talk about this next session or in between? No, now.
Now.
Right? Like, fortress now.
Yeah, I mean, money has its own challenges. My players have found creative ways of spending it over the years. There was the bathhouse that they felt the need to build. So does this mean dragons might be motivated to like take silver or copper over gold and platinum and gems, even though it's more valuable because it's just not enough volume?
Sure. The value of the hoard has a minimum floor, so it always has to be at least worth a certain amount. But if your size is variable, the size for the table is based on constitution. So the idea here is you have to collect loot that fits your lifestyle. You can't just be like, this is my favorite. It has to be kind of, you got a thing you like, and you got to lean into that, right? It's the best. It's your thing because it's not just because you like it. It's because it works for you. It helps facilitate the lifestyle you want to lead. If you want to be a big chonky boy, you got to accumulate a kind of treasure that allows you to sit on it. You can't just be a collection of art, like paintings. It has to be something that actually works for that. So, again, this is all very flexible, and we might find a better way of doing this. But at least for now, we're sort of like thinking we want there to be a relationship between the dragon and their treasure. We want there to feel like it's more than just your resources to expend. It's part of your life, and you should feel connected to it, because dragons certainly feel connected to it. Their obsession with it is not logical, right? It's a deep down instinctual thing where they feel very unreasonable about their money. Even good dragons, they're like, if you ask them, hey, could you pay for this man's surgery? They'd be like, well, have you explored all your options? Right? Like they won't just like hand it over. They'll be like,
let's talk about this.
Yeah, maybe there's another way.
If I pay for that surgery, I might not have enough gold to cover me when I sleep.
Yeah, right. It's like I could, but if I did it for you, then I'd have to do it for everybody, and then it becomes this whole thing where everyone's knocking on my door every day, and I don't want that. You don't want that. Nobody wants that, right? And it's interesting, right? And we're trying to figure out a way to talk about that in a way that doesn't feel like you're being a bastard, but also like feels interesting and fun, and that you're playing a creature that cares about this in a way that only makes sense to it and others like it.
The gold sickness.
Yeah, right. Like in the way that paladins, like their oath is kind of this abstract, unrelatable thing that if you're a non-paladin, you're kind of like, like bend the rules, man, just like this once. The paladin's, no, I'm not. No can do. It's like, yeah, but then, it'd be really easy if you just did that. It'd be convenient. It's like, no, this matters to me. It's like, okay, fine.
What's next if we bend this rule?
Yeah, it's like I can't bend it for this little thing, right?
Next thing you know, we're murdering orphans.
Yeah, right. You can't do it. Slippery slope, right? So
yeah, absolutely. So we are actually up on the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head out?
I mean, if you're interested in what my company does, we do lots of things besides dragons. It's just really fun to talk about them. If you can find all our work at our company, 2cgaming.com, and the stuff we're doing, we're very excited to continue to collaborate and build interesting products with the RPG community. We also have a wiki that we are developing, which puts a lot of our content up available for public use. So if you're wanting to try out or see what exists in our books, you can find it there along with the book it's featured in. Obviously, it doesn't have everything, but like we have our subclasses, we have our monsters, we have our spells, and we're adding more and more in every day. So if you like free content, it's a good place to find it.
Nice sneak peek. Thanks for coming on, Ryan. I appreciate it. I always enjoy talking with you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Until next time, stay nerdy.
Yeah, see you, chat. Thank you for the questions.